Now, Europe's battle against Islam continues. Last week, the Belgian House voted for a bill to ban the niqab, the full facial veil that Muslim women wear. And France has been pushing for similar legislation for a while. Polls in France now show that 70% of voters there support this ban. And now a German MP is calling for all of the EU to ban this veil. So the Muslim population in Europe does far exceed that in the U.S. But with an estimated 7 million here, and as the fastest growing religion, we have to ask whether Americans would ever go this far. Here to discuss it with me, I have Michael Moynihan from Reason Magazine. Michael, thanks for joining me. Now, you spend a lot of time in Europe.
I do,
And
yeah.
so my first question to you is, do you think that Europe just has a problem with all religions because they are a much more secular society, I guess, in the U.S., or is it Islam in particular?
I think it's both, but this is definitely about Islam. This is not, Europe going the more secular route on, everything from education to public financing of religion, things that they've backed off on. But what is interesting is if you look in the Belgian example, you have, and the government estimates this, about anywhere from 25 to 50 people that actually wear this thing in Belgium out of about 1 million Muslims. So is it actually a problem? Is this something that's sweeping the Belgian countryside? Well, no, it's not. So they're firing a shot across the bow saying that, look, we believe that Europe is this, and you are not conforming to this. It's about all Muslims. It's not about people that just wear this article of clothing. And, look, they try to cover this up. And in 2003, when the veil controversy was going on in France, Nicolas Sarkozy said, look, we are not banning just the veil in schools and the rest of it. We're also banning yarmulkes and crucifixes. And everyone in France understood what this was, and this sort of dog whistle politics. This is not an issue. Nobody had ever brought up crosses. No one had ever brought up yarmulkes or any Jewish garb. So they were basically throwing it in, much like during the Axis of Evil we threw in North Korea. It's not about Islam. It's not about the Middle East. It's North Korea, too. So it is obviously specifically about Islam and about integration of Muslims in European society.
And so obviously something like the niqab is just the easiest target, sure, I guess you could say, because, if 50 women in the entire country are wearing it, then what could possibly be so offensive to these people that they choose to make this such a divisive issue?
Well, I mean, it's a cultural offense in a lot of ways. I mean, you said this in your intro about France, and we could say the same thing about Belgium. Same thing is also gaining steam in Switzerland. Same thing is gaining steam in other countries, now even Scandinavian countries, which are very surprising, that there is an idea that this is culturally something that we can't deal with in Europe, or is very difficult to deal with. Whereas immigration in Europe, most of these arguments about immigration are about Polish plumbers. You remember this big controversy in France about Polish plumbers. Same thing is happening in England. The controversy with Gordon Brown calling a woman a bigot. She was wondering where all these Eastern European people were coming from. Answer is they're coming from Eastern Europe. But I mean, this is the kind of thing that is very different. I mean, these are not people from within the EU that are traveling for work and traveling home. People, rightly or wrongly, and I'm not taking a side on this, think that there is a way of life issue here, that this is very un-Belgian, this is very un-European.
Is it really that different, though, because European countries have a much larger Muslim population, many of whom are immigrants? So I do see this as an immigration issue, because I think you can see the same thing here in the U.S. when it just happens to be the Latino population, and there tends to be a large hate towards this. Because think about this, right now there are around 5 to 7 million estimated Muslims in America.
Sure.
Do you think that if that population grew to larger proportions, that we would see the same kind of thing, that the same ball would ever get rolling?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I mean, these types of things, these types of laws can't have a tougher constitutional challenge, for instance, in America. In France, the French Constitution has a very, very specific separation of church and state. So they can argue on these grounds, and it's touchier than the American situation. Do I think it could happen here? I don't, actually. I mean, we've done a better job, and I'll go out on a limb and say we've done a better job of integrating Muslims than Europe has. For instance, there was a really interesting comment by a French MP who said, you know, when we were talking about immigration in previous waves, we didn't have the phrase second generation, which is very, people say he's a second generation Muslim. In America, I mean, this is something we don't do primarily because with Mexican immigration, totally different ball of wax here. We have similar religious backgrounds, people that come here and want to become Americans. There's a welfare component that doesn't exist like it does in Europe. So, I mean, could it happen in America? I mean, it's possible, but these types of laws, this type of backlash against the immigrant population is almost impossible here.
I don't know. I think that America also, in a sense, is a much more religious country, and so, I mean, not like we're any good at not trying to be hypocrites, because we are really good at that here in America. But, you know, in a sense, because it's such a religious country, I don't think that Americans would try to go that far. They would find other ways and just put it under the guise of racial profiling rather than attack the religion. For example, there was a story in England where there was a pastor that was arrested for calling homosexuality a sin to people on the streets. You would never see that here in the U.S. because that's what preachers and pastors say here every single day.
Yes, and I mean, I think this is a loathsome position, but I say thank God that they're allowed to say it here. And I shouldn't probably be invoking God in this context, but we do have a First Amendment. The English do not. I mean, these are these hate speech laws that people get. There was a pastor in Sweden that was not arrested, but was fined for the same thing, and he took it before the European Court of Human Rights. But actually back to what you were saying about America as a religious country, there are some strange overlaps. After 9/11, a very conservative author named Dinesh D'Souza wrote a book that said, you know, hey, 9/11, maybe they do have a point that we are culturally sort of too permissive here. So, I mean, we do have people in this country that are, you know, aping some of the views of conservative, not to say radical, but conservative Islam. People, I wouldn't say Islamists, people that are conservative within the Islamic faith. Whereas in Europe, there is, again, a much more secular culture, and it is much less common that there are people to make common cause with religious elements.
A different society, Michael. Sure. Thank you very much for being here. As there does seem to be a wave spreading across Europe of many countries that are trying to ban the Islamic veil for women.